Hi, everyone, and welcome to Better Minds channel. As mental health therapists, we really want to destigmatize seeking help and getting your questions answered. These little chit chats offer a way for you to not just to get to know us, but also hear about topics we are so passionate about when it comes to working with our clients. So I'm Brittany Webb, the founder and a licensed therapist here at Better Minds Counseling and Services. You can find out more information about the practice below and also furthermore about both of us. But I really want to take a moment to introduce Erik Osterlund, also from Better Minds Counseling and Services, who is an associate licensed therapist and group therapist. Erik specializes in anxiety disorders, depression, borderline personality disorder, and OCD. I'm really excited for Erik to expand on OCD today and really talk about getting to know ERP, or exposure and response prevention, which is like the gold standard for treating OCD. So I guess, Erik, my first question for you is, for someone who has never heard of ERP before, how would you kind of explain this to them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Exposure response prevention does have the most research behind it, showing that, is the most effective treatment for OCD and anxiety. And in simple terms, exposure response prevention really is two parts. So there's the exposure part where, we're placing you in certain situations that maybe trigger some OCD fears or some anxiety. And the other half of that is the response prevention and finding ways to resist the compulsions that maybe come along with some of those fears. And when we're doing exposures, like over time, as we're engaging with them, we habituate to some of those fears and those anxieties that we've been avoiding for so long, and we kind of retrain our brain to realize like our fight or flight response is going off when maybe the facts of the situation aren't really lining up.
That's so interesting of right, it's almost because I think so much of ERP, right, as being that B part of CBT of behavior therapy, and how our behaviors kind of shape us, and then then it's reinforced when we kind of get stuck in that OCD kind of cycle.
Yeah, like a lot of times the OCD cycle can almost feel like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, because the thoughts are telling you to do these certain compulsions so that this fear doesn't happen. But a lot of the times the compulsions actually do lead to some of those fears coming true.
Mm. I guess what would you say are some of the biggest maybe misconceptions that people have about ERP?
Yeah. Well, ERP, it can be very intimidating. It's definitely one of those treatments where, it's hard to get up every day and know that you're going to make yourself a little bit anxious. And I think one of the most common misconceptions is that it really is just all about the exposures and all about the response prevention. And even though that is a big part of the treatment, at the beginning, there's a lot of skill building and, understanding and almost getting to know what the OCD is like. And, a lot of the times, like, people come in and they're just like, when are we doing exposures? Are we doing an exposure today? And, there's a process to that. We also create a hierarchy so that we aren't just putting you in the deep end with some of your biggest fears. And, we want to make sure that we're challenging the anxiety in a way that leads to like a sense of accomplishment and, you know, being proud of yourself for not avoiding and, going towards that thing that is really scary in those moments.
Yeah, and I think of a lot of people, hear the word exposure and immediately feel anxious, which That's fair, right? And valid of like, great, I'm gonna be facing the fear and things that I've been trying to like avoid. Like, yeah, it doesn't sound great when I hear the word exposure.
Yeah.
Um, but what would you say is someone who is maybe scared to try ERP?
Yeah. I would say you are not alone. Like, that is probably the most common experience. Like, going in, there's a lot of anticipatory anxiety, even, when we know what the hierarchy looks like or what the exposures look like, there can be a lot of anxiety about starting it. And my biggest suggestion is really to kind of trust that process and know that, a therapist is never going to put you in a situation where you would actually be harmed.
Mhm.
And, like, we have that sort of safety net where, if an exposure gives you a little bit more anxiety than you expect, I'm not going to make you do that again until you feel like you can. Like, there's always ways to break down an exposure and make it more manageable for you. Just like there's, so many ways that we can kind of increase that anxiety and make more anxiety producing exposure.
It's almost like, right, being able to systematically or kind of slowly dial up that anxiety to feel more manageable versus how it has felt kind of before when someone's been in those situations.
Yeah. Yeah, and like, through facing those fears and anxieties, they actually become a lot less scary because there's something that we're thinking about more, we're considering more, but we're also using skills to reframe it in a way that helps us really understand, like, the intrusive nature of some of these thoughts.
Amazing. How do clients know ERP is working?
Yeah, that's a great question. You can expect to know, like, when ERP is working when you start to notice, like, maybe less time spent ruminating or engaging in compulsions. I've had a lot of clients talk about, having a lot more free time because, even if maybe they are doing some compulsions still, they've reduced the amount of times that they've done it so much that, they have more time for activities. And you also may kind of see other mental health issues start to come to the forefront. Like, I know sometimes, when you start to feel pretty managed with your OCD and, the thoughts are rolling off you a little bit more, it leaves more room for maybe some depressive thoughts to come in, or other issues that maybe have been kind of lurking behind the OCD. And so that's to say that, you start to see that improvement in your anxiety. You're able to manage those thoughts in a way that feels a little bit more automatic. A lot of the times at first when you're starting these skills, there's some worksheets, there's, like, you're writing some things down, you're practicing changing those thought trains that you have rolling in your mind. Um, and over time, like, you kind of create this way of managing your anxiety and, like, creating a different relationship with it. Like, the anxiety and the thoughts and the urges are still going to be there. They're just going to be not as intense and not as, debilitating to those day-to-day tasks.
And I think something I was thinking about just now is to really highlight, I think, of how much you have even seen as being someone who's treated OCD for many years at this point with using ERP and various levels of care from PHP or partial hospitalization program, right? Which is like step down from being inpatient to even now in like the outpatient world. So I think that's, you have a great viewpoint of both of those levels of care and implementing ERP and having clients work through that with you.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's definitely, like, at those higher levels of care, typically that's when you see other issues start to kind of present themselves as you get better with your OCD. And, I think typically the experience in the sort of weekly outpatient therapies are really kind of like, the mental energy it takes to manage the thoughts or resist the compulsions. Like it feels like it takes less of that energy over time, and it gives you that sense of accomplishment once you've kind of finished an exposure.
Certainly. And also, yeah, a sense of accomplishment and like confidence, I feel like with it.
Yeah, like there's a sense of gaining back that control.
Hmm. Absolutely. What's something people are surprised about once they start ERP?
Yeah. I think a lot of people are surprised at how much time they actually do engage in compulsions, because a lot of the times compulsions kind of present themselves as just a really quick thing. It's innocuous. It'll just be a really quick second, but that sort of builds over time, and it really, kind of eats away at your day. And when people start to engage in exposures and see some success and habituation to that anxiety, they're surprised at how much time they have, and they're able to explore new interests. And I think that is also kind of one of the most exciting parts of the treatment, is that you know outside of the exposure response prevention, now that we have all of this new extra time in our lives, like we can work to kind of create a routine that supports your values and keeps you engaged in those hobbies that maybe OCD got in the way of or had you avoiding.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to explain like exposure and response prevention, because I do feel like, I've heard even from clients of like, oh, it sounds scary. Like, no, I don't want to. I love how you put like the deep end, because I think of like, this is a method to help people learn essentially how to swim again. So then whenever they're in the deep end, it doesn't feel like they're drowning and can barely kind of hold on. So I know we both love ERP, so we could probably talk about it even longer, but at least it's a little overview. But what resources would you be able to share for folks who are maybe either know someone or even going through OCD, or maybe even suspect that they have OCD themselves?
Yeah. So some resources to check out. I provide individual sessions for OCD and anxiety here at Better Minds. So there's appointment scheduling link that you can schedule a consult with me and, talk about how ERP may benefit you or how the counseling process looks if you want to get a more personalized outlook. And additionally, too, I'm also starting up an OCD caregiver group on Fridays at 5 p.m. And that's going to be a space for parents, friends, family members who, have someone in their lives who's experiencing OCD symptoms and, wants to learn more about how they can be supportive in their loved ones' treatment process. Um, and I always love talking about ERP and anxiety and all of these different things. So if you want to learn more, I highly suggest booking a consultation and seeing what these therapy services can do for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for any, I think, therapists and professionals, you also offer clinical consults for OCD and that as well. So that's, I think, wonderful kind of well-rounded like resources available to both sides when it comes to OCD. But yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Erik, for your time. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us. And we'll have the resources listed below with our website and how to get in touch with us. And we'll catch you next time.
Thanks, Brittany.
Yeah.